Good morning. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming this morning, and especially for your interest in lupus. As Peggy said, I'm Hope Hetherington. 10 years ago, I lost my younger sister to lupus after her 25-year battle. My father was a founding member of the Lupus Research Institute, and I serve, and our whole family is really dedicated and committed to finding a cure for this terrible disease. We don't want what happened to my sister to happen to anyone else. I proudly serve on the lupus board, as Peggy said, and I do that in honor of both my father and my sister for all their hard work, and we wish all the investigators that we fund enormous success. Lupus is, as we know, a devastating multisystemic disease. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Mary Crow. Dr. Crow is physician-in-chief, chair of at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. She is chair of the Division of Rheumatology, and she's director of the autoimmunity and inflammation research that they do there as well. My sister's wonderful team of doctors were at HSS, so that gives me special pleasure in introducing Dr. Crow. She made one of the pivotal discoveries in the last decade regarding the role of interferon alpha in lupus, and her important finding has helped to advance research and has led to new drug therapies, or drug developments, I guess we should say. I offer my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Crow and all lupus investigators for their dedicated hard work, and I ask them to please keep working really hard.
Just make a little switch here for a second. Maybe I better not. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me here, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to join my colleagues to tell you about lupus research. And I think that my message is one of optimism and hope if we can keep our current momentum going. And that's really the important message, that we've made so much progress in the last 10 to 15 years. And the opportunities that we feel are really striking, and we need your help and really the help of everyone around the country to allow us to kind of make hay and make lives better for our patients. As you've heard, lupus is a disease that has tremendous impact and significance. It can be life-changing or even life-ending for those affected. The disease typically has its onset early in life, typically affects women. And one of my messages is that all of the complexity, all of the challenges that we face in lupus really present us with opportunities in our research, opportunities to learn more about not just lupus, but about biology and about many diseases. So that hint that about 9 or 10 women are affected with lupus for every one man gives us important hints about the disease. Of course, men can develop severe lupus, as you've heard, but the fact that so many lupus patients are women gives us hints about the role of hormones. And one of the exciting advances, I think, and something that I think a lot about, is current research that puts the focus on the X chromosome. So, as you know, women have 2 X chromosomes, men have 1. And the research in genetics, the insights into how the genome works, allow us to have the groundwork to focus on the X chromosome and take that hint about the increased prevalence of lupus in women and gain new understanding about the underlying basis of the disease. The medical care of lupus patients is very challenging, as you've heard from Dr. Katz, and it's particularly challenging because the disease is so diverse from one person to another, affecting many different organ systems. But again, this gives us an opportunity. If you think about it and think about the pictures that you saw, lupus is really everywhere. It's in the lymphoid organs, the lymph nodes, the spleen. It's in the kidney, it's in the skin, it can be in the cardiovascular system and in the brain. But what that means is that we have a tremendous window into the disease by studying just even the blood of lupus patients. So lupus is a special disease. We refer to it as the prototype autoimmune disease, meaning that it is everywhere and can be considered as representative of many different autoimmune diseases, and in fact, many diseases in general. So although the disease is challenging, we have so much to learn from the patients, from the animal models that represent the disease, from the cells from the patients that we study in the laboratory. Lupus is a disease in which genetic variations that we all have from one person to another kind of add up and make some individuals more susceptible to develop the disease. These genetic variations interact with environmental triggers that we don't understand very well, and I think studying the environmental triggers of disease is a tremendous research opportunity. We know that things like sunlight, particular medications, can trigger the disease or make it worse. These work with those genetic variations in the immune system, in the DNA, and play themselves out at the level of the immune system. So the immune system comprises the cells, the factors, the molecules that our bodies use to fight infection, viruses and bacteria. But as Dr. Katz said, the immune system in patients with lupus is a little off. The regulation of the immune system doesn't work well. If we can study these alterations, as we do in lupus, we gain insight not only into lupus disease and can help lupus patients, but we gain understanding of infectious diseases. The very same cells that are infected by the mononucleosis virus or HIV even are among the cells of the immune system that are altered in their function in lupus. So lupus represents a tremendous opportunity for us to not just help lupus patients to develop new therapies that are going to improve the lives of patients, but to gain new knowledge about biology and medicine. So it's been really a remarkable about 15 years in my mind, really a golden age in lupus research. And sometimes maybe we get a little down and a little negative on how difficult it is to make progress. But from my point of view, we have learned so much. My own understanding of lupus is so much greater now than it was 15 years ago. With very strong support from the NIH in the early 2000s particularly, and very important work that was done at the basic science level, such as through the Human Genome Project, we gained very, very important insights into the disease. So you may know that there have been important studies of the genetics of lupus. And those observations where we look at the variations in the genome that are associated with a diagnosis of lupus would have been meaningless if we didn't have the work of the Human Genome Project that laid out for us the DNA sequence of healthy genomes. So the point is that we gain insights from lupus research based on generally applicable basic research. We have learned a lot based on a very important discovery about 15 years ago that's been very relevant to my work. There were receptors discovered in fruit flies called toll-like receptors. What they're called is not important, but I think the observation has been very important. So what was learned in these little fruit flies has been applied to mice and then humans, and has led us to understand important ways that the immune system can be activated by viruses, bacteria. But I think the central observation that has been very influential for me is we don't even need a virus or a bacteria to trigger the immune system in a disease like lupus. Our own DNA and RNA can do the trick. So as was noted, the immune system and its autoantibodies target themselves to self-DNA and RNA in lupus based on those autoantibodies. But the DNA and the RNA can also kind of juice up the immune system in a way that I think has very broad implications. One of the outcomes of the DNA and the RNA activating those important molecular pathways, the toll-like receptor pathways that were discovered in the fruit flies, is that there's production of this molecule called interferon that was mentioned that I've been very interested in. So we learn about lupus by studying lupus patients, by studying the animal models that reflect lupus, but our research is interpreted and stimulated and made relevant based on this broad base of very basic research done by many investigators all over the world. The investigators who have been supported by the foundations who are represented here, as well as others supported by the NIH, discovered another set of molecules. And they would not have discovered those molecules if the human genome had not been defined. These are called BLIS or BAF, and were studied in great detail. Ideas that came out of the basic research labs and the lupus labs were picked up by pharmaceutical companies and led to the development of the drug that you heard about that is the first FDA-approved new drug for lupus in many, many years. But over the last 4 or 5 years, as you well know, NIH funding has dwindled so significantly that exciting projects that I've reviewed as an NIH peer reviewer have not been funded. I'll tell you, it's very demoralizing, actually, to do all the work of reading the work of our colleagues, read the work that will be developed in labs around the country if support is available, get all excited about it, give it a great score in the NIH study sections, assume that, of course, it will be funded because it's so interesting and exciting, and then learn that, no, it was not funded because there wasn't sufficient NIH funds available. So I guess this is the downside of my message, that we are at a point in time when the cutbacks in the NIH are being felt. I think an important point that you all need to understand is that even more significant for progress for patients than the cutback in research is the impact on the investigators. So once a scientist loses their support through the NIH or other sources, it's very difficult to continue on with their work. They often go into other lines of work. And even when research support picks up a couple years later, that person is really lost to science. So it's so important that we somehow work all together at the NIH level, at the foundation level, to keep our research going, to keep our scientists doing the work that they really want to do. I've heard, actually in the last few weeks, if some of you, I think it was 3 Sundays ago, watched the Chris Matthews show on Sunday morning TV, Howard Feynman made the statement when Chris Matthews says, "Tell me something I don't know." Howard Feynman said, well, the academic medical centers have really given up on the NIH, and they've recognized that they're going to have to rely on the pharmaceutical companies and private philanthropy to keep their research going. And I'll tell you, no, Howard Feynman is wrong, that the pharmaceutical companies are not going to make up the difference in the research funding that NIH previously has provided. The pharmaceutical companies are terrific and are working very hard to bring new drugs to patients. But they leave it up to us in the academic centers and the research institutes to do that groundwork that is the basis for the drug development that they do. So no, the pharmaceutical companies are not going to pick up the slack. It's up to all of us around the country to encourage support for the NIH that will keep these great advances that I really believe are very, very significant going. So what's in the future? I think probably each of the speakers will have a different point of view on that. I think that, again, coming out of the Human Genome Project and more recent work looking in detail at the genome, there's tremendous opportunity to look at what's been called the junk DNA, the DNA that does not make proteins, but that now we understand makes regulatory molecules, RNAs, that can control the immune response and all of the biology of the body. And I think that there are great opportunities in studying the genome in more detail that will lead us to new treatments for lupus if we can keep that support coming. So thank you for listening to me. Again, the message is, let's not let these advances of the last 15 and even more years kind of stagnate. We need to keep things going. Thank you. Thank you.